It's the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. For more on the Seminoles, including Osceola's coverage from veteran Seminole insiders, message boards, Osceola virtual happy hours, and more, go to theosceola.com.
Hello and welcome to the Seminole Sidelines podcast, presented by the Osceola. Founded in 1982, the Osceola is the longest-running publication dedicated to the coverage of Florida State's athletics and the FSU fan experience. My name is Patrick Burnham, and I'm a football writer for the Osceola and the host of Seminole Sidelines. I am joined today by the founder and owner of the Osceola, Jerry Kutz, who also spent 20 years working for the Seminole Boosters. The Osceola's managing editor, Bob Ferrante, who has been covering FSU athletics 1998, and also by former FSU football player and Osceola football analyst, Mark Salva, who played at Florida State from 1984 through 1988 and was a graduate assistant on the 1993 national championship team. After that, Mark moved on to become the offensive line coach at South Carolina from 1994 through 1998, and now works in private business, but is stayed actively involved in football, coaching at the high school level and training offensive linemen in the off season. To learn more about the Osceola, go to theosceola.com. But guys, welcome to our first ever Seminole Sidelines podcast and our first football podcast for the 2020 season.
Glad to be here.
Well, obviously, the main topic we're going to get into today is a look at how the 2020 season schedule sets up for head coach Mike Norvell and his staff and his new football team. And, of course, I want to get into your general expectations of the team, knowing what we know about their personnel coming back from last season and what we were able to witness on the practice field in the spring from the new staff. But certainly just want to get y'all's thoughts on how excited you are about the 2020 FSU football season and about FSU athletics returning to hit the field. Obviously, the other fall sports will be getting into action too, volleyball and golf and all the other sports. But certainly, Jerry, what are your thoughts on FSU getting back on the field in all its athletic endeavors?
I'm really excited. Got to interview a couple players yesterday, and that it's just always exciting to talk to the student athletes and interested in bringing that coverage to our readers.
Bob, what about you?
It feels like it's been a really long 5 months since we walked off the practice field, practice number 3 of the spring, March 12th. And of course, the basketball team wasn't able to take the court either that day in the ACC tournament. So I think it's a welcome return. We love sports. It's a welcome distraction in all of our lives. I think it gives us a good feeling about the future. So looking forward to the months ahead.
Mark?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to any kind of return to normalcy. And I mean that both in my personal life and at FSU football-wise, for us to be back to where we were and get back on that track to normalcy. So there's a lot of underlying feelings there. So, yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I agree, guys. It's been way too long. I was so disappointed when, obviously, the country virtually shut down, including FSU spring practice on March the 12th, 3 days into it. Mark, you talk about normal. There's been nothing normal about this offseason, and certainly really not going to be anything normal about football season this year, given what we're facing with the circumstances surrounding COVID-19. It's been an unusual offseason for any first-year head coach, particularly as it pertains to Florida State, Mike Norvell and his staff. We've gone to an ACC-only schedule, and we will get into that a little bit. But what we have to draw on from last year, guys, is the personnel that Florida State is returning and what we were able to witness from the staff, not only in the off-season drill that we got to witness, but also the 3 days of spring practice. And, of course, we have interviewed all of them on the Osceola personally for a webcast. But, Jerry, in general, given what we know and given the circumstances, before we get into the schedule, FSU did come out. When we get into each opponent, but, I was concerned that this ACC would try to have a marquee matchup, a North Carolina versus Florida State, or Notre Dame versus Florida State, or Clemson versus Florida State to start the season. That's not how it played out. Before we get into that, what are your general expectations for this team coming into this season, knowing how the schedule sets up, with starting with Georgia Tech and Samford, then moving into the more challenging parts?
I thought we caught a break there, opening with Georgia Tech, who's probably one of the less challenging opponents on the schedule is huge for a team that with a new first-year head coach and who only had 3 days of spring. It's a big help, I think, that you start with a challenging but not difficult Georgia Tech, followed by Samford. I think those first 2 weeks, it gives Mike a great chance to figure out what his team is and prepare for a very difficult run starting in Miami the next week.
All right. Yeah. Before we get into that, though, general thoughts on the returners, the talent we have coming back, and we're going to get into position breakdowns in another podcast. But just your general expectations of this team and coaching staff, given the entirety of the schedule.
Well, I see a team that comes into this season with a better mindset. They definitely believe in these coaches, and in talking to the players, they didn't believe in the last staff, and I think that's huge when you really believe in your coaches and what they're doing, and the detail at which these coaches are working with them on all aspects. I think I'm encouraged by the mindset. That's what I think. Now, in terms of the talent, it is what it was, can these coaches draw out more from essentially the same players? And my answer to that is yes. So I think our talent this year will be better, even though it's pretty much the same personnel.
Bob, your general expectations based on returning personnel and obviously what we saw from Mike Norvell and his staff during spring.
I think the intangibles are players are buying in and coaches are fundamentally doing a better job on the field than the prior staff. Those are 2 positives that should result in more wins or at least better results. Getting Marvin Wilson and Tamarian Terry back, difference makers on each side of the ball. When that was announced, I was floored by Marvin's decision, but I think it makes a lot of players around him better, makes the linebackers better, makes the secondary better because you're getting that pass rush up the middle. They need to develop more guys who are alpha dog types, like a Marvin Wilson, like a Tamarian Terry. And I think the underlying other thing that's interesting is there were so many defensive players lost to injury last year along the way. Jaden Lars Woodby, Josh Kando, Hamson Nasruddin went down late in the Florida game. If they had those guys, if they had some kind of a little bit more consistency on defense, how much better would they have looked? I think there is some optimism on defense that this is going to be a much better unit. And I think that's what gives me a good feeling going into the year.
Mark, what are your general expectations based on last year's personnel and what you've learned about Coach Norvell and his staff?
Yeah. So I look at this team and I think about last year, and we made it to a bowl game despite all the frustrations that we had watching that team play. And, if I look at our schedule and I look at the rosters on those teams and I look at our roster, there's maybe 1 or 2 teams that I would say have a better roster probably than us. And now there may be teams that have maybe 1 or 2 higher ranked players, but I think overall roster, I'd be hard pressed to say there's 3 teams better than ours. So now it becomes this matter of, can we get this team cohesive? Can we, it looks like they have belief. Everything I've read and seen and heard of Mike Norvell, it seems to be right on point. And so it's got me excited. I don't want to get my hopes up too high. But I'm going to choose to be optimistic about what this season is going to look like.
Yeah, and I agree with parts of what all 3 of you said. One of the things that really caught my eye during spring practice, and we know that Florida State has some talent coming back, and, it's got some young talent that's still potential. But, the one thing that really caught my eye in the 3 days of spring practice was the attention to detail. I was very impressed with the staff in those 3 days of spring practice. And if that is their day in and day out intensity level on the practice field, then I think Florida State will see a improved football team. Now, I don't know that it'll show up in the overall record. It is a challenging schedule. But certainly I remember Coach Norvell speaking about the fact in his opening press conference that he was not going to waste 1 second or 1 rep of any practice with his kids. And that was certainly evidenced on the practice fields in the 3 days of spring practice that we got to see. And so I'm like you guys, I'm very excited to see how this team grows. Obviously, unusual offseason, it will even be an unusual preseason, and certainly challenging for a first-year head coach to have to deal with this and try to learn his and implement his system in the fashion that they're going to have to do it. But certainly was very impressed with what I saw in the spring, and think that Florida State will have some growing pains, but certainly I think the staff has got some renewed energy, not only for the players but for the fan base, and it's going to be a very fascinating season. Of course, I do want to get into the schedule a little bit and look at the first opponent, which is Georgia Tech, who enters its second year under head coach Jeff Collins, who Norvell faced at Memphis when Jeff was at Temple. They are coming off a 3-9 season last year and 2-6 in the ACC, but they do return 10 starters on offense and 7 on defense, and he is obviously a sharp defensive mind, having spent time at Florida's defensive coordinator. Guys, as we go through the schedule, I kind of want to do a win, lose, or draw thing. Do you think Florida State will be the favorite, the underdog, or is it a kind of a 50-50 pick'em game? And Jerry, I want to, obviously we've talked about the fact that maybe drawing Georgia Tech and Samford to start the year benefits Coach Norvell and his staff, given the unique set of circumstances. But just kind of give us a quick thoughts on Georgia Tech as the opener at home.
I think it's a game Florida State can win, certainly, even coming out of the box with a first-year head coach and only 3 days of spring. The thing that Georgia Tech always has is speed. They're a typical Southern team that has a lot of guys that can run. And so anytime I think that Florida State plays a team in the South, our natural advantage of speed and athleticism is somewhat neutralized. But I see that as a win for Florida State.
Bob, what are your thoughts on Georgia Tech?
I think Jeff Collins has the advantage of being a year 2 coach with that program. The disadvantage is he's completely reshaping that offense from a triple option under Paul Johnson to, something that's much more, let's say, advanced and a modern college football offense. I think Florida State has the talent advantage and, should win this one. As Jerry said, can and should win this one.
Mark, Georgia Tech?
Yeah, if you're going to rank all our opponents on strength and roster and as an opponent, they would probably be near the bottom. So to Bob's point, he's in year 2, but it is a massive overhaul of what they've been done in the past under Paul Johnson and what they're doing now. So, the personnel on that team was tailored to an option offense. And now, he's only in year 2 of revamping that whole thing. So he has to turn over that whole offense in terms of personnel, not just in system. So I would think, for us, it lines up pretty well for us to give us a chance to be able to, to compete and get a win. I mean, if we have any hope at all, this has to be a win.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that Florida State's got a great chance of winning this game. Georgia Tech really struggled on offense, and obviously they've gone to more of a spread offense, or actually a spread offense versus the wishbone. And, obviously I think the fact that you don't have to prepare for that, it's got to be some relief. They're probably happy that Georgia Tech's offense has changed. But
the defensive line is happy about that.
Yes. Yeah. But Georgia Tech was 14th in total offense last year in the SEC and 10th in total defense. So I like the way Florida State matches up, and of course being at home I think helps. So I've got Florida State, obviously way too early to predict, but I got them with a win there. September 19th, Stanford University comes to town. That game was able to be worked out. And of course, probably the most fascinating thing about Stanford, which will be a decided underdog, is the history that Stanford has with Florida State, having given it 2 of its head coaches, Bobby Bowden and Jimbo Fisher, a linebacker coach that won 2 Buckus Awards. And then, of course, the Osceola got me from Stanford. So, but Chris Hatcher is returning. Chris Hatcher, who was offensive coordinator or worked with Hal Mumme at Kentucky early in his career, is the head coach at Samford. They play in the Southern Conference and are coming off a 5-7 year. And, Bob, I want you to start with Samford. How important was it for FSU to get this game back on the schedule, given the fact that Norvell is facing the circumstances he's facing with limited time with his team over the last 9 months?
I think you need a good, high-quality FCS opponent, not a lower-level FCS team like an Alabama State. I think you need a really good competitive team that's going to challenge you. And look, financially, Florida State needed to make this work with Samford. It's $450,000. This was, critical for the big budget picture. So Samford needs that money. Florida State needs the game. Clearly it feels like a win, a definite win. I hope it's the kind of game where the Seminoles can get to see a second quarterback, maybe a lot of those number 2s and number 3s, and see who coaches can feel like I can count on that guy going into Miami and that difficult October schedule.
Jerry, what are your thoughts on that game being rescheduled?
I have a pretty good memory of Samford taking us deep into the fourth quarter a couple of years ago. And we had to, I think there was 4 minutes to go when we hit a ball maybe to McKitty to win that game. So they're a team that's going to come in. Pat, the mindset of those kids up there. They're going to play up to their level of competition, and they'll try to challenge it. So they're not a pushover, but I do think it gives you an opportunity after, in the Georgia Tech game. I think you're going to have some issues of getting on and off the field, getting your special teams in and out, and some game day operational type things that this game gives you a chance to work on. You may see some position changes after the first game even, that the coaches want to try some different things after seeing the kids play. You may have depth chart changes. So I think it's a great setup to the Miami game.
Mark, you're a former major college football coach. Why is a game like Samford important for a football program? And to kind of piggyback on what Bob and Jerry have talked about, why is this important for Knight and Norvell given the circumstances?
It gives you an opportunity to Jerry's point, to tweak things, to see what you got. Going early into a year, that's every coach's wonder is, what do we got here? We've been hitting each other for, all spring and all camp, and we finally get to play against some real competition and just kind of see how it all fits, all the stuff you've been working on. And so, you heard the axiom that a team makes its greatest improvement from its first to its second game. We're going to need that litmus test going into the rest of the schedule. So, the schedule sets up pretty nicely for us that really need it to be able to plug everything in, see what we got, and coach the heck out of them, and get a good picture of what this team is going to look like further down the road. These first 2 games set up for us to be able to do that, and we needed that bad. So, yeah, they did us a favor by scheduling these 2 games at home, and they're probably our 2 weakest opponents right out of the gate to see what we got.
Yeah, and the schedule gets immeasurably harder after September 19th in the Samford game. The next week, Florida State takes on arguably its second biggest rival in Miami, at Miami. Miami is coming off a 6-7 season a year ago, had significant losses on defense, including 2 stalwart linebackers in Michael Pickney and Shaquille Quarterman. And then we learned yesterday that Gregory Rousseau, their star defensive end, has opted out of the season. So Florida State's Miami does not look to be as deep or as good on defense as they were last year on defense, and they were outstanding. Second in total defense in the ACC, 13th in the nation. Their offense should be improved. They obviously struggled mightily on the offensive line, but they do get De'Aaron King back. De'Aaron King transfers in from Houston, the dynamic quarterback that started for 3 years there for Tom Herman and Major Applewhite. They also are replacing their leading rusher from a year ago and all three starting receivers from last year. But Manny Diaz is under a little pressure in year two after a 6-7 season last year. But Mark, I'll let you start with Miami. Obviously, you played in this rivalry. What do you think about this game? I've got it as a 50-50 game, but want to get your thoughts.
It's going to be weird watching this game without any fans, without the atmosphere that this game usually brings. In a rivalry game like this, without that buzz and emotion and the energy to draw from, it'll be curious to see how it turns out. Now, looking at this team, they have an established playmaker at quarterback, a guy that's done it, and is very highly thought of. That always gives you a chance, and that's going to be the concern. Are they going to be able to utilize that guy and maximize what he brings you? And if it does, that's going to give us problems. I mean, he's a good player, right? Defensively, they've lost those two linebackers. I've been watching them for 4 years. They were pretty good, and if they're able to replace that, which I don't think they probably will right at the gate, that might give us a chance. So it's a rivalry game without the energy of a big crowd, without all the pomp and circumstance that usually goes with it. But it's still that white helmet with the U on the side, and if that doesn't bring it out of you, if you're wearing an arrow on your side, then I don't know what I can do for you.
Jerry, what are your thoughts on the Miami game this year?
Well, I think I wanted to play off Mark completely. That stadium, especially, Mark, when you played back in the old Orange Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
It was a freak show. And the crowd definitely had an influence on the ball game. And now you don't have the crowd. And we've seen a diminished crowd effect since they went into, the new stadium. But I think that's a huge factor. And we're going to see that everywhere we go. We'll talk about NC State is a tough place to play. Notre Dame. Well, without a crowd in there, it's going to affect it. The other thing I would agree with Mark, play off me on this, but I've always seen the Miami game as the players' game. Like the Florida game is the fans' game. The fans get really up for Florida. But I think our players over the years, like you said, when they see that U or the Spear, I mean, it's a backyard brawl. They went to high school with each other. And it just seems to me you guys get up for them more than even Florida.
As a player, yeah, I for whatever reason, and I don't know why it turned out that way, it's because they were so good early, back in my era in the 80s, and we were trying to catch them, and then the 90s came when the table turned. And plus the number of kids that we had that played together in Dade County and Broward County and all that, everybody knew each other, but you respected them. I'll say that, we knew those guys were good, and we knew those guys, and we wanted to beat them just as bad as they wanted to beat us. But for some reason, it never was like that for Florida. You're right. It was more of the fans kind of thing. But for Miami, man, that was the one that got you jacked up. That's the one you wanted to win. That's the one you were really paying attention on Sunday when coaches came in and said, okay, we're not going to watch the film from last week. We're going to start on Miami right now. Whatever happened last week doesn't matter,
So, Mark, do you have this as a 50-50 game or?
Right now, yeah. Right now, I think it is until we know what we have. And, I think roster-wise, we may be a little better on defense, but they're probably better on offense because of their quarterback.
Jerry, 50-50 or win-loss?
I have that as a 50-50. I have a couple 50-50s, and that's one.
Bob, what do you have Miami as a 50-50 or win-loss?
Yeah, I think it's a 50-50. It might be leaning a little bit with Rousseau opting out when you don't have that kind of playmaker on defense to challenge Florida State's line. Who knows what that line is going to look like in week 3, really early in the season. The only other factor to add on to what you guys have talked about with the atmosphere and the fans and such is very few players in this Florida State roster have beaten Miami in their college career. If you've been around as a red shirt and you remember, say, 2016 and that long run Yes, but the heartache is 17 with the close loss up here, and then 18 where they were up big and didn't make it happen. And then last year, not even competitive last year. I think that kind of sits bad with a Florida State veteran, where you set that tone to the younger guys and say, this is the chance to really set a tone for the program. Similar in a sense to what Jimbo did in year one in 2010, going down there. That was a big statement game, I think, for Jimbo as far as getting continued buy-in from players as he was building the program. You could see something similar happening this time around too.
Bob, that's a great point. I think that's a great point. If we're going to set this thing right, I think it sets up nice to make that game the game that Norvell puts a stamp on this program and gets us back in the right direction. I can't agree with you more.
Well, after the Miami game, Florida State will get a probably much needed and probably one of the most vital buys they've had in a long time, given the fact that it'll give Mike Norvell and his staff not only 2 weeks to do some evaluation and revamping of personnel and implementing more schematic stuff on offense and defense, which may be limited during the preseason because of the circumstances. But then he gets a chance to go on the road and get another signature win as FSU will travel to 2020 ACC member Notre Dame, which is basically a consensus top 10 team, depending on what polls you're reading coming into the season. Brian Kelly is back for his 11th year. He brings back Ian Book, one of the better quarterbacks in college football. They were 43rd in total offense last year and 18th in total defense. They have 7 returning starters on offense, 5 on defense, and a tremendous challenge for Florida State. And, Bob, I'll let you start on your thoughts on Notre Dame, which I think could be Florida State's first loss of the 2020 season.
Yeah, I've got it as a loss. My only initial thought was, thank goodness it's not late November at 8 o'clock on national TV where it's cold like it was 2 years ago. Notre Dame, they're a top 10 team. I think they're way ahead as a program. It feels like a loss, but it could also be a learning experience for the Seminoles moving forward too.
Mark, your thoughts on the Notre Dame game?
I mean, initially you would think, it's a loss, you would think. But I'm going to say, our defense, I think, has great potential. I think our strengths might match up with theirs a little bit. And, we have a chance. Of course we have a chance. But I think being realistic, you have to say, it's going to be a challenge, especially going there,
Yeah, and, again, I think that the bye week may help Florida State going into that game for a lot of reasons. But, Jerry, what are your thoughts on the Notre Dame game as, we look at it right now?
I'm with you guys. As I sit here today, I feel just like you do. However, suppose we beat Miami, in those
Huge
2
confidence.
weeks.
Yes.
If that is a statement game in Miami and our players play clean and with great enthusiasm, we're going to start thinking we can beat Notre Dame.
Agree, 100%.
Yes, I agree with that too. Miami win could be a huge stepping stone for this program. Certainly. It would give, especially after last season, the returning kids would, I think they would totally be bought into Mike Norvell and have a lot of confidence going into that Notre Dame game. I agree totally. But a tough game.
I would say I would venture to say that this team will not capitulate like it has in games past, in the past couple of years. I think all we would ever ask is that we go out and give it a great effort, compete, and if we do that, then because of who we are and the players we have on our team, we have a chance to win. And you say that, I could say that for every team on our schedule. I think if we compete and play hard and whatnot, I think we have a chance to win. Now, will we? I don't know, but I think that's all we could ever ask.
Yeah, well, we talked about this last year, as tough as things were last year. Florida State had a chance to have 3 or 4, at least 2 more wins. Virginia and a couple more than they had last year. And but anyway, that was we don't.
I've never been more frustrated than that Virginia game. I never watched a Florida State game where I just absolutely was pulling my hair out than that Virginia game last year, and it just drove me nuts.
Yeah, after Notre Dame, Florida State gets what I consider the sleeping giant of the ACC, and it always has been. Everybody talks about what a great job North Carolina is, and Matt Brown returns for his second year. The Tar Heels do come to Tallahassee. Mac was 7-6 last year, 4-4 in the ACC. A lot of people have them highly thought of coming into this year with a quarterback that Seminole fans know the name of well, Sam Howell, who was a long-time commitment to Willie Taggart and Walt Bell, but decommitted when Coach Bell went to UMass as their head coach. They do return 10 starters on an offense that was second in the ACC last year, and 7 starters on defense that was sixth in the ACC last year. Jerry, I'll flip it back to you. Obviously, Mac is a Florida State graduate, has a national championship at Texas and a 251 and 128-1 record as a head coach, and has done a fantastic job in riding the ship at North Carolina after inheriting a 2-10 team from 2018. What are your thoughts on that game?
Well, you got the youngest coach probably in the ACC going up against the veteran oldest coach in the ACC in the Norville Mac Brown matchup. Mac was actually Billy Sexton's roommate when he was a student here at Florida State. And I have the ultimate respect for Mac as a game day coach. I think he knows how to put a game plan together. And I think he, if it's going to come down to coaching, you got your hands full when you're playing against Mac Brown. His teams are usually very solid, tough. If you remember, I'm sure some of you do, when we played at North Carolina some years back, I think it was maybe 91, and we were in there. It was a 1-2 matchup.
It was 93, wasn't it?
93, yeah. We were ranked first and they were second.
It was. I remember that.
It was a slobber knocker.
It was.
I mean, he Mac Brown's teams will be tough. And so I think that's, to me, is the fascinating matchup. And then the other thing is, I think Sam Howell, I want to make a confession. When we were recruiting him and he was highly, highly regarded, I watched film of him and I didn't see it. And apparently I was really wrong because he had a great freshman year. And we talk about a freshman coming in and making a difference. He did it. Howell did it.
Yeah, he threw for 38 touchdowns last year as a true freshman, which was an UNC record, and then finished second in passing yardage to obviously everything Trevor Lawrence at Clemson. So, he had an outstanding year, and we can understand now why the previous staff was so disappointed when he decommitted. Certainly an excellent football player. And, Jerry, you are right. Mac does have a very good staff, and I think it is probably they're probably facing 4 teams with really, really elite staffs, and I think North Carolina is one of them. But, Mark, your thoughts on the Tar Heel game?
Yeah, they're not going to beat themselves, to Jerry's point. They're going to be solid, well-drilled, know what they're supposed to be doing. So you're going to have to go out there and take it from them. Do we have that ability to do that? I mean, they got now a veteran quarterback, playmaker, and that guy like that always gives you a chance. So that's going to be a tough one for us. And like I said before, I'm sure we'll compete. We'll be up for the challenge. But they're just ahead right now.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that FSU would be an underdog going into that game at home. Bob, your thoughts on North Carolina?
I wasn't sure if Mac Brown was going to be up to the task, leaving TV and coming back to the sideline yet again. Was he was it the right choice for North Carolina? It was the right choice as far as generating enthusiasm and fundraising for sure. He's assembled a great staff. He's recruited extremely well, not just getting Sam Howell. It's guys on offense and defense. It's a really good program. Put me in that doubtful category too with Sam Howell. I didn't think he was going to be this good this fast. I think I just saw him more as a developmental guy. But when you saw him early in the season, you saw he had a little bit of that it quality, and he wasn't fazed by those, big games. And then he delivered and almost knocked off Clemson. So I've got this as a loss, but I think to our points earlier, you want to see Florida State play and be competitive and fight and just see how it plays out.
Yeah, I agree. And, of course, then after North Carolina, Florida State goes to Louisville, and I think right now it is a race between Louisville and Florida State to see who can unseat Clemson in the Atlantic Division. Now, I'm obviously hoping that this one division thing becomes very popular in Florida. And ACC might go away from two divisions. But as Bob and I spoke about last year, I'm a huge fan of Scott Satterfield, the head coach there. And before Mike Norvell, who obviously I'm very fired up about at Florida State, I was hoping that Florida State would take a run at Satterfield. He's done an excellent job at Appalachian State, entering his second year. He will get his starting quarterback from a year ago back. Jawan Pass was injured early. He's more of a dual threat quarterback, where Mikael Cunningham, who is the incumbent, is going to be more of a runner first. He really struggled to throw the ball. He looked scared at times last year to throw the ball against Florida State. But he'll have two quarterbacks to choose from. Returns 8 starters on offense, 7 on defense. And in year 2, you usually see progression under a new head coach. So, Bob, I'll let you go with Louisville first. I've got it as a 50-50 game. They were fourth in the ACC in total offense last year. 12th, not quite as good on defense, where they ranked 12th. But, I've got it as a 50-50 game. They got some talented, skilled players on offense. What are your thoughts on the Louisville game?
Their receiver, Tutu Atwell, is a little dude, but he is slippery and fast. And, yeah, they've got some really good pieces on offense. Satterfield, it wasn't a job with a ton of talent, I think, coming in. I think he's squeezed just about everything he could have out of the roster in year 1. And it's kind of scary to think what he can do in the future with the program, but highly respected with what he's done at App State. I've got this as a 50-50, kind of leaning toward a loss a little bit, just because, again, it's a year 2 program, and they're considerably ahead of Florida State right now.
Yeah, and like Mac, he took over a team that had imploded the previous year in 2018, where they went 2-10, and just what was a disaster left by Bobby Petrino, which is kind of his deal. But anyway, Satterfield's done a great job. Mark, your thoughts on Louisville?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say we're going to win this game. I'm going to say we're going to win it, and I'm going to say because they're Louisville and we're not, and it's as simple as that for me. Because regardless, there's not probably a player, maybe one or two, but there's very few players on that roster that probably we even recruited. And I'm going to say that we're going to be at this point moving along, everything installed, and that we're playing at a pretty decent level. And, I respect Louisville. I respect Satterfield. I think he does a great job too. But, and the thing that would give me pause is that it's in Louisville. But, yeah, that's just, I'm going with my heart on this one.
Okay. Nothing wrong with that. We all do that. Jerry, what are your thoughts on the Louisville game?
I'm with Mark on this one. I'm going with my heart. You need to win this game if you're going to be 8-3 or better. And so just on heart. But let me make a point here. What's going to be interesting, we talk about the Miami game setting the tone for the season, and I think it will. And if you beat Miami and you hold your own in the Notre Dame North Carolina game, then Florida State wins this game. If you struggle in any of those 3 games, you're playing at Louisville, and all right, they don't have their fans there, but we don't either. You're on your own. I mean, it's me and you going out back of the bar with nobody else. And it's going to be intestinal fortitude. Nobody's going to help you. So I think, again, the Miami game sets the tone. And if we maintain our confidence in our coaches and in ourselves, we're going to beat Louisville. That's my feeling.
Well, Jerry, you bring up a great point, because I think with this pandemic, where it put us at a huge disadvantage is, this team's constitution is not very tough, right?
Exactly.
And our mindset, confidence from the last several years is really fragile. And without, having spring practice and some of the things that, you typically would be able to do to change that culture and to give that confidence and mindset, that Miami game is going to be huge to establish that. And to your point, if we don't do that, do we have the toughness and the mental toughness to push through and turn it around? Because it'll be really difficult at that point. We got to change everybody has to have, the team has to have a mindset to be a little tougher, a little more mentally tough, and establishing that takes time, but also, having success early is critical.
Yeah, Gene McDowell once said to me, I said to him, our former linebacker coach that coached at UCF, I said, boy, your team doesn't have much enthusiasm. And he asked me, which comes first, enthusiasm or success? It's kind of chicken and egg.
Mm-hmm.
And if we get that success at Miami, I think it carries over into that, that street fight when you're alone in Louisville.
Yeah, and of course, then Florida State gets a bye week on October 31st, a welcome bye week after that 3-week run of Notre Dame, North Carolina, and Louisville. And then Pittsburgh comes to town with head coach Pat Narduzzi. They were average ACC program a year ago, finishing 8-5, 4-4 in the ACC, and they were 10th in total offense, 3rd in total defense, which is Narduzzi's specialty. He usually has a very solid defense. They have an excellent offensive coordinator, Mark Whipple, who was the offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers for a while, and a guy I've known since his days as a USFL coach with the Arizona Wranglers back in the 80s. And I actually enjoy spending time with Mark, but excellent coach. But a team that I think Florida State, particularly playing at home, should have an advantage over in the game that I have down as a win. Jerry, I know, what are your thoughts on Pitt? They will be solid defensively. They struggled last year offensively and lost some of their key components, particularly at wide receiver. But what are your thoughts on the Pittsburgh game?
I have that as a win, and after being on the road that long, it's a welcome return to Doak, and I see that as a win.
Mark, what are your thoughts on the Pitt Panthers and the Florida State coming in that game?
Yeah, I'm going to count that as a win too. Again, they'll be solid. They're not going to make a lot of mistakes. I would think that we have more playmakers than they do, without actually having watched them play very much. I'm putting that down as a win.
Bob?
I think it's a win, low-scoring game, two pretty good defenses. It offensively not very efficient, but has a senior quarterback, so we'll see how much they progress. But I feel that's a win.
Yeah, so we all got Pitt as a win based on what we know now. And then, of course, Florida State does go to NC State the very next week. I think that's a markedly different game because there will be at least limited number of fans in the stands based off what we know now. Although I would hope for a miracle and maybe we get some more fans capacity in all stadiums by November, Florida State's and everywhere else's. But Dave Dorn is entering his 8th year at NC State. He is under some pressure after a 4-8 season last year where they struggled mightily on offense. He did revamp most of his staff, including replacing both his coordinators, which is typically the standpoint where the next year the head coach, if he does not win, gets fired. So he's under some pressure. They were 11th in the league in total offense last year, 8th in the league in total defense, and this is a game that I have down as a win. Bob, I'll let you start with NC State.
Will Dave Doran be the coach when Florida State shows up in Raleigh, or could he be out the door or kind of a lame duck at that point? I don't think very highly of NC State. Didn't see a lot of talent on the field when Florida State played them last year. I've got this as a win. I think the atmosphere does change things dramatically too. makes it easier for the Seminoles.
Mark, your thoughts on NC State?
Yeah, this is always a tough game for us, for whatever reason, and I don't know why, but it just seems it's always a street fight. No matter how good we are or how bad they are, and vice versa, it's always a tough game. But I will say this: the guys that frustrated me last year on their team, the guys that made plays, I remember the running back, some of those defensive guys, I believe they're gone, right?
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, I feel pretty good about it because watching this game the last couple of years, it's just, again, frustrating that it was always a street. And it was that way back when we first got in the league. No team gave us more problems, it seems, over the years than NC State, it seems, in terms of either it's hard to get up for, or you kind of take it for granted, or, you don't, for whatever reason, they get up for it and we never seem to. And that always seems to be a tough thing for us. So I'm going to put it as a win, but it's going to be tough.
Yeah, well, thankfully, Larrell Murchison, the star defensive tackle, has gone on to the NFL.
Yeah.
They got a little bit. They got a good fresh sophomore running back coming back. Bam Knight. Yes, I think they've taken a step back, and especially on defense. So I don't know if they have anybody coming back with Murchison's talent, but certainly I agree with you on that. Jerry, your thoughts on the Wolfpack?
Yeah, I think it might come a little bit, a motto is there and maybe gave them a little bit of a belief in themselves. I think speed, they tend to usually be able to run, neutralizes some advantages. And then of stadiums I've been to in the country, theirs might be, it's right there with Miami in terms of nasty.
Irritates you.
Yeah, I've personally been involved in 2 fights in that stadium where I had to separate, Florida, an NC State guy attacking a Florida State guy. I mean, I've seen more violence in that stadium than anywhere but maybe Miami. And it's an irritating place to play, right, Mark?
Oh, gosh. It's just something about it. I can't quantify it. I can't put my finger on it. And I think it just, for some reason, they just give us problems, and going there just gives you the heebie-jeebies,
But there won't be, they'll probably find their 12,000 most annoying fans to put in there. But yeah.
Well, they got the most annoying coach, that's for sure.
Yeah, they do. But he's going to be, I agree with Bob, he's going to be under so much pressure by the time Florida State gets to town. It's 50-50. I think if they are having a tough season, I think the only reason that they may not pull the trigger early is because of the unique set of circumstances everybody's facing. But but I've got this as a Seminole win like you guys do. And of course, I don't want to spend much time on the next opponent other than we do owe them they do deserve to be respected. Clemson comes to town. We could go on and on about their depth, their talent on the starting both sides of the ball. Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, it looks like they're going to be without Justin Ross, the receiver, but Amari Rodgers is back. They are replacing 4/5 of their offensive line. But they're bringing back their whole defensive line. They were number 1 in almost every statistical category in the ACC, and no more than higher ranked than 20. And by higher ranked, I mean they were 23rd or better in every key category on the offensive and defensive side of the ball in the country. Dabo, we all know Dabo. I don't think he's irritating the entire ACC with some of his antics, but I think we all would say that. I think this is a game where you would want to see Florida State compete the entirety of the game based off what we saw last year, where it was just a ugly football game from start to finish. And Dabo really called off the dogs in that game. And, what I want to see is, any given Saturday, there's a chance for an upset. We all know that. But based off what we have to go from last year, Florida State will be a decided underdog. And what I want to see is Florida State push these guys for 4 quarters. That would be my expectation going into this game. I'll let Jerry, you can start on Clemson.
Well, I agree with you exactly what you said. This is a game where you just want to see your team go out there and try to compete. But I'm going to use this as an opportunity to make a point. about the COVID. I don't think Trevor Lawrence and his parents are concerned about the COVID hurting his pro career. But let's suppose that his left tackle and several of his offensive linemen are on isolation that week and can't play in the game. Do you play if you're missing your offensive line as a quarterback? Because that's what can end your career, is a blindside watch out block, and down you go. We're going to see some of that this year in college football, where some players who start the season at some point in the season may opt out of the season. And I just want to make that as a point. I'm not predicting that, but a lot of things can happen that in this season of unknowns.
Well, and you're right. That is reality of the situation, and probably something we probably should have let off breaking down the schedule with. But obviously, we are hoping that not only Florida State, but every team in the United States stays as safe and healthy as possible. But you are correct. There is a chance that rosters could be altered drastically from week to week, and certainly that would give some decided underdogs a chance to compete maybe in some games that they wouldn't be considered to be able to compete for otherwise. But and injury and health, especially with COVID, will play a factor into some of these games. But I'm trying to look at this as glass half full, and that we're going to figure out a way around this thing. But I don't know that that's going to be the case or actually even realistic. But Bob, what are your thoughts on Clemson?
Same as last year. You want to see them be competitive. When they showed up at Clemson last year and weren't, and to use Mark's term, capitulated, yeah, it was kind of draining. You just didn't see a lot of fight at all. So yeah, Florida State has to take some pride back in this series. It's been really one-sided of late, so it's got to change. And this is a loss, but Florida State has to put together some fight.
Yeah, and of course, then Florida State finishes with Virginia and Duke. Virginia at home on November 28th. Obviously, Bronco Mendenhall has done a great job, but he did have some significant losses coming off of last year. They lost the quarterback, Bryce Perkins, who accounted for the vast majority of their offense. He was obviously the leading passer, and I believe he was either their first or second. I think he was their second leading rusher on the team. He accounted for a ton of their offense, and they do return 7 starters on offense, including their entire offensive line, which they had an average run game last year, and they are fairly talented on defense. They returned 3/4 of their linebacking core, which was highly productive, with Charles Snowden and Zane Sandier leading the way as seniors. But they were 8th in total offense last year in the ACC, 5th in total defense. And this is a game that Florida State should have won last year. And, obviously Virginia went on to win the ACC Coastal and played in the ACC championship game against Clemson. But I think this is just a game where obviously it's deep in the season. Florida State should have found itself, and if they're relatively healthy, this is a game where I think Florida State matches up better from an athletic standpoint and is deep enough into the season where they've learned what they need to do schematically, and a game that I think Florida State wins. So I'll go with you, Bob.
Ton of respect for Bronco. The talent takes a step back. They lose a lot of players. This feels like a win, especially at home for Florida State.
Mark, your thoughts on the Virginia game?
Yeah, I think so. I think as bad as we played last year and barely lost, I would hope that we are much better and they're worse. So I think this is a win.
All right, then we get to finish the season at Duke. And, of course, David Kutz, I think a coach that all of us have a lot of respect for. And we get to see our old friend Greg Fry, who is now the offensive line coach at Duke. He was obviously the offensive line coach at in Willie Taggart's first season in Tallahassee and played at Florida State on the first national championship team. So Greg is a guy we know and love and goes by the nickname Big Sweat. But obviously a game that I think Florida State should win. Duke is coming off a 5-7 season last year, 3-5 in the conference. They do have 7 returners on offense, but replacing their quarterback, Chase Bryce, the Clemson transfer, is going to be the guy that's given the first shot to win that job. They got 6 starters on defense, 2 defensive ends that are very good, Chris Rump being one of them, and Victor Dimikichi, who I think that's the way you pronounce his name, but both of them were very solid players off the edge. But again, I think because of where this happens in the season and because of the difference in talent on the roster, I think this is a game that Florida State will close out the regular season with a win. Mark, what are your thoughts on Cutcliffe, who obviously is a great coach and done a great job at Duke, 72 wins in 12 years versus 79 losses, and is taking them to bowl game after bowl game, which is not your typical Duke football team.
Yeah, I have a ton of respect for Coach Cutcliffe and the job he's done, continues to do. And this says trap game written all over it to me. I know they'll come in there, they'll put up a fight, and we just better show up and be ready for it. In a tough year and a tough schedule. If we look at this any other way, then we got to give it our best go. It could be a trap game.
Yeah.
But I'll say we win.
Jerry, do you have any thoughts on Virginia or Duke? We've all got it as both of them as wins.
Yeah, I've got them both as wins. I agree with y'all. Duke, Duke, like you say, Cutcliffe he's a heck of a coach. He gets a lot out of his players, discipline, and if we're a disciplined team by then going in there, I think we win for sure. Virginia, we should have won last year.
Yeah, that's what we talked about. Yeah.
That was a capitulation, as Mark said. Very impressed with it.
All right. I know Mark's got to drop off for a second. Obviously, as we probably should have prefaced early on in this thing, rosters availability could be different week in and week out due to COVID. We are basing our predictions off what we know now, which is most everyone's going into the season healthy from what's been reported. We don't know if that's the case, but I've got Florida State going anywhere from 8-3 to 6-5. Based off what we know now, and I want to get y'all's prediction within a game or two. So I basically got them going 7-4 if you went to the median. But Martin, since you got to go, what do you think the high end of the bar is for Florida State this year, and what the low end of the bar is for Florida State this year?
High end, I'll say 8 is the high end. I'll say low. I don't want to even think about it. I mean, low could be 4. So somewhere between 4 and 8 wins, I think. I'm going to say it's 7-4.
Jerry, what's your high end and low end for Florida State this year?
I think 8. I think they'll win 8. I had him like as a 7-2-2. 7 wins, 2 losses, and 2 maybes. And my maybes were Miami and North Carolina. They're going to win one of those, I think, if not both. So the high would be 9, more probably.
I had 6-3-2. That's why I went 7-4.
Yeah.
Bob, what about you?
Yeah, I think 7-4 is realistic. They got to turn a lot of these close games from the last few years into wins. Florida State's let those slip away. Think about the Boise, Virginia, Wake Forest, those type of games last year. You're just a couple plays away, honestly. That's how close you are. So I think 7 wins is realistic. I agree with the high point being 8 and the low point being potentially, I think 5.
Yeah. All right, I got a couple questions before we wrap up, and I know we're going to get into a lot further detail on the team as far as personnel at each position. But Bob, you have kind of started a public or social media campaign with the Florida State game being taken off the schedule for this year. And I know that Governor Ron DeSantis has made a push publicly is going to try to make a push to get that game back on the schedule. I don't know how much he can influence that. But you have made the suggestion that if both of them qualify for a bowl game, which we all would anticipate, but they're not in the college football playoff, that maybe they set up where they go play each other in the Gator Bowl or Outback Bowl. I don't know how conference affiliation is going to work with. I would assume that everything's staying status quo there. with conference affiliations as far as how they impact the bowls. But Jerry and Bob, is that, do you think that's a good idea? And do you think the NCAA and SEC and ACC would try to set that game up for a bowl game if they were anywhere comparative in results of their regular season schedule?
Well, I'll go first on this one. I think we're way too far from knowing how it's going to work. Are we going to get through 11 football games this year with the COVID? And if you have to social distance a stadium, I don't know how you make the numbers work for a bowl to do a bowl game, unless television really ups the ante. But most of those bowl games are driven by sponsorship and ticket sales. And if you're socially distancing, boy, the price of a ticket would be a lot. I'm not sure how realistic bowls are. That's, it's too early to say. If we're having no problems with 12, 15,000 people in the stands, they may let the bowls go to 50%.
Yeah, and of course, all this is under the assumption that they do play bowl games and we do get through the season, obviously. I mean, there's a big question about that. I think we're all realistic on that, but we are, as football fans, I am hoping that we do get to see the season come to fruition, a complete season. And of course, I think we've all got questions on whether we even get to week one when we get into it, if you want to get into the reality of it. But I'm basing all this off the fact that the NCAA and the ACC and the SEC are both planning on moving forward and trying to play complete seasons. There are a lot of periphery things that are going on right now that could impact the college football season, not only COVID related, but players having demands on testing and other social items on their agenda, whether it be it the Pac-12, Big Ten, and ACC. I know that I believe it was one of the Western Athletic Conferences came out with their Player United thing last night. So anyway, there are a lot of things that could impact the college football season. But Bob, if we get to play a full college football season and there are bowls, and Florida State and Florida are eligible, but not eligible for the college football, or not selected for the college football playoff, do you think because the game was missed in the regular season that the ACC and SEC would be open to providing a marquee matchup that's off the regular season schedule?
I think the conferences should do whatever they can to help facilitate that type of matchup. Let's presume that Florida is not in the playoff, not in the New Year's Six. It could happen. Does it feel like a long shot? It certainly does. But I think let's go back to the days where college bowls were matchmakers. They really wanted to put together great matchups,
yes,
and not just a team from this conference versus a team from that conference. The goal should be to put together great matchups. And this is an opportunity to do just that. Will it play out? I'm doubtful, to be quite honest. Should we make every attempt to try, whether it's Jacksonville, whether it's somewhere else? I think so. And I think the bowls will throw out those tiers, the win-loss records. They will try to just match up good games.
All right. Well, guys, we got a lot more to talk about as we move forward, but certainly appreciate y'all joining me for our first Seminole Sidelines podcast. And to our listeners that are not Osceola subscribers, please go and check us out. We do a weekly happy hour. You can find our email addresses if you'd like the link. You can go to About Us section of the Osceola up at the upper tab, and you can get our email addresses. We do have some free content on the Osceola. We have done position previews of the offensive line, quarterback position, and running back position. The running back position preview is actually open to everyone. So if you'd like to get a sample of what Bob and I think about what FSU, who's going to replace Cam Akers, you can certainly go to theosceola.com and look up running back preview. It's called Who Will Replace Cam Akers. And we certainly hope that you will check out the Osceola. And we will be back with another Seminole Sidelines podcast next week. Guys, thank you for joining me today and your input on the schedule.
Take care, Pat.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Pat.
This has been another edition of the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. To subscribe to the Osceola, go to theosceola.com. Go Noles!